E se você pudesse entrevistar a maior referência da sua área profissional no mundo? Foi isso que aconteceu comigo em 2020, quando eu entrevistei o Anders Ericsson, a maior autoridade em expertise profissional do planeta Terra. Ele me deu uma entrevista de 1 hora em junho de 2020, mas infelizmente 15 dias depois ele veio a falecer. Então o que vocês vão ver agora é a íntegra da minha entrevista com Anders Ericsson. Aproveite esse momento porque foi muito especial para mim e espero que você possa aproveitar também.
The first time that I heard your name was in the book called Bounce from Matthew Said, and it was 88 years ago. So 8 years ago, I couldn't imagine that I couldn't speak with you now. So this is it's so important for me because you're not your research, but the big book was game changing for me in a lot of aspects. And your work inspired me a lot. So this interview means a lot to me. So thank you so much.
Well, I love talking to people who are interested in these issues here. And I love arguing with people because it seems to me that, that's really what science is all about, is collecting better and better evidence. And eventually, hopefully, we'll agree here on what basically the results are.
I made my homework and I watched probably 5 or 6 interviews from you, like Larry King's interview and Brian for Optimize, and a lot of interviews, but with one purpose is just to don't make questions that I could get my answer from Google or from your book. So I don't want to ask you about deliberate practice, mental representation, anything like that.
Again here, I really appreciate your attitude. And I guess looking back on my own life, I find that the way I learn is typically reading a lot of different books on the same topic, and only by understanding one person's view of somebody else will you eventually, own your own understanding of these issues.
Amazing. So I'm going to start with a period that I couldn't find in my research, from 1947 to 1967, because I saw in one of your interviews that you said, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that a group of psychologists came to your university in Stockholm, and was a game changing for you, and you are like 20 something. So I want to know about this period of your life, like your 21st years, because I want to know that how can this period influence you in your life, in your work.
So did I send you a chapter of a book that never got published? Did I?
No.
Okay, well, I actually was invited to give a series of lectures, and they wanted me to publish a book, but for all sorts of reasons that ended up not happening. So I have, drafts of, most of the book, but I don't know. I think at this point I probably want to really change it if I decide that I want to publish it. But anyway, I guess the very first chapter there, I kind of do talk about it. Basically how, I guess my first, I think basically that's one thing that I've always had as sort of a goal for what I'm doing. And I guess the very first one was being a missionary in Belgian Congo to kind of help people, because my parents were basically part of a church. But I think, I was probably in middle school where I started talking to other students about that. And I got less and less convinced here that, that was a meaningful thing. So then I got interested in exploring. We had some Swedish explorers who basically, spent their life, kind of mapping out and describing the habits and cultures of people. And then I guess as I was kind of reading up and keeping up on that, I noticed, that there was kind of going to be less and less places when I was going to be an adult. So then I kind of moved into wanting to be a scientist. And originally I wanted to be a nuclear scientist because that seemed like, the big thing when I was in high school. But I think as I was sort of getting to the end of my high school years, I got more and more interested in psychology and Strindberg and a lot of other, authors, and basically, kind of trying to understand here thought processes with the intent here that if I could understand how people I admired were thinking, I could hopefully improve the way I'm thinking. So basically, I think that was, so I started as a student, both at the Royal Institute of Technology and Nuclear Physics, and at the University of Stockholm in their psychology program. I think after about 2 years, I realized I really felt like I could do much more research on things that I was interested in psychology. So I more or less, by the middle of the third year, pretty much stopped attending that engineering program. So I think that, that probably brings me up to about 22, something like that. But if you're interested, I could send you that chapter.
Please. Please send me.
But, I don't know that there's sort of really anything exceptional, except, that I think now, having seen all sorts of different research environments, one of the things that was kind of unique with our environment in the psychology department was that there was basically so much interest among the people to kind of discuss things and argue about things. So I guess at 3:00, faculty and students would get together, graduate students, and, we would argue about things.
Amazing.
And I think, I believe that, getting opportunities to try out ideas and getting feedback on them and stuff like that, that's really the most effective way in which you can change. So if you're just more or less absorbing what people are telling you, I think there's several problems with that. It's very hard for you then to find what is kind of your place and all of that. And that was actually one of the things that happened around 22, 23. I was kind of traveling and stuff like that. And we went to England, and I had, what we always kind of did was to go to the university. And then I guess that one time, one of the professors was willing to talk to us for a little bit. And and one of the things that he said that I thought was actually kind of interesting, that he felt that when he was thinking about a new domain, he would actually take off, a month or something like that, and just write down what he thought about it, sort of even before he started reading what other people actually had found. And I think that's a really good idea, because if you just try to understand what other people are thinking, it's even harder for you to kind of really make clear here what you might actually believe or know or whatever that might actually give you a different perspective on things.
Interesting. So interesting. Because this is, remember, something that I heard from a story from Peter Drucker. The guy asked him, like, how did you could be teacher in Chinese art, and in the same way is like the major reference in management. When I was 21, I decided to study topics from another areas for like two topics for 1 year, different areas. So I decided to jump in another domains and everything. So And he said, but imagine in my time that we don't have internet and we don't have Google, so I have to use the libraries and everything. So I think, I don't know if you agreed, but I think it's similar than this process of new areas and domains, and you go by yourself like a pioneer.
Well, yeah, I think, that if you think about what is required for those people who are very successful, I think that independence and learning, and I think also having a lot of experiences of problems that you struggled with and then eventually actually found a solution. And I think, that gives you confidence that somehow, you have the resources to kind of improve your understanding. But obviously science, I mean, just because you think it's an interesting possibility doesn't mean now that the evidence ultimately will support it. But obviously, if you have enough ideas, you're probably going to be more likely to have one that actually would lead to an advancement of people's understanding.
One of your answers in the Larry King interview, you mentioned like a little bit about your family influences, but Larry King doesn't dive in this direction. And I was like, come on, I have to know that, because this is so important. Because we saw that in your research we talk about the environment. So if you could tell me how your family, I don't know if you have siblings or not, and how was your environment and how this influenced you in your journey.
I guess I worked with the Nobel Prize winner Herbert Simon, and I think in his autobiography, which I recommend actually, that speculating about what actually influenced you, I think, seems to me to be almost antithetical to science. I mean, okay, it's a data point of what you can remember, but the question is, how good is your memory? And basically, just talking to my siblings, I have a younger brother and sister. So even hearing, their memories of things that, we both have talked about, makes it clear that, there wasn't any videos. I mean, if we had like videos from my entire development, then I guess we could go back and potentially really look at what did happen. But I think, I think my mother in particular, she never really had an advanced education. And I guess, and I think that was very frustrating to her, that she never really got a chance to see here what she could have been able to do if she had better opportunities. So she had, basically very much this kind of philosophy here that, it's much better to try and fail than not try. And that basically, if you don't aspire to do something important, you're not going to do anything important. So basically, I think, that was kind of her feedback. But I think in general, they were inviting us. So when they had their adult friends over, we would sit and listen to the table and maybe even be invited here to talk about things. And I think that, but I think actually one thing that my brother and sister said was that when I was a teenager, I had a lot of arguments, especially with my mother.
Wow.
So they felt that they had to be extra nice to compensate for all the troubles that I was creating.
And how about your father? There's something influence.
Well, I think he was a very strong believer, that if you worked hard and really were deliberate about how to build your kind of skills and backgrounds, that there was essentially hardly any limits here to what you could accomplish. And And I guess I remember him talking about some people who were professors and other things. And I guess he was talking a little bit about his own experience of how some of these people were treated different because of their parents. So, he was coming from kind of a family where I guess my grandfather was a kind of machinist on a Navy ship, so he had some skill, but really no academic training.
Okay. Okay. I was searching about Sweden and about thinking maybe what kind of sports or games that you could play in your early days, because you never a lot of interviewed asked you what you try to do now, like to be your best, and you said in a lot of interviews that you trying to be your best to studying all other people, and but I never found an answer from some particular sports or a game. And I found some interesting, because in Sweden, I don't know if there's another place, but orienteering is a game, or
Orienteering.
orienteering. Yeah, this kind of thing influenced you, because I heard about maps and clues, and you have to have steps, and you use a lot of this kind of words in your material and in your book. A lot of path, road, steps. Your book, Road of Excellence, is a lot of this kind of way, not definition, but terms of the way and orienteering. And I thought maybe this is a very familiar thing to him. So I want to ask about that.
I think that's more popular basically outside the bigger cities. And I grew up in Stockholm,
Okay.
and I've kind of done it. I think I even had to do it as part of my military service and stuff like that. But it really was not something that I kind of, even tried to work on outside of these required participations that I had to do. I think all Swedes play a little bit of soccer, and hockey and skiing, and I think, I was sort of like kind of average, maybe sometimes depending on the sports, below average. But I did have an interesting kind of experience because I was an exchange student to United States for a year. And basically when I came there, I initially started with American football, but, I that wasn't a good match. So then I guess they asked me if I wanted to play with their soccer team. And I thought it's really interesting. So things that I had learned as a kid, if I applied this, it was just, I remember the first thing I was asked to do was to hit a penalty kick.
Okay.
And basically, I just did something, that we as kids would do to sort of kind of almost suggest here that I was going to shoot it in one side as opposed to the other. So when I basically hit the kick, I was really lucky because it was relatively high in the opposite side, and the goalie was throwing himself to the wrong side.
Okay.
And they said, "Oh, you can't do that again." So I pretty much just did it again, and with the same result. And they just thought that I was sort of like, super skilled, whereas in Sweden I was sort of clearly below average. And I think, it was sort of, I'd never been in a situation where they would sort of say during a game, send it to Anders, pass it to Anders. And basically, I guess I was like a little star. And then I guess, they only have those sports here for certain periods. So I played basketball for one period. And then when I got back to Sweden, I actually played with some amateur teams and just found that I was better than they were. And obviously, I'd practice a lot more, but that kind of idea here that, your performance is not something that you're kind of born with. So, but anyway, that's kind of my experience. I played also squash during my university period with a friend, but never really competing in any tournaments or anything like that. But I think it's a kind of a good thing to have something where you're trying to get better, because I think that gives you insight into what it takes to get better, and that can be applied pretty much to anything that where you can actually measure the performance.
And which university that you make the exchange in the United States?
So this was not university. I was still in high school.
Oh, high school. Okay.
So basically, and I went to upstate New York, okay, relatively close to the Canadian border for that year.
Okay, perfect. So let's change a little bit, but from your childhood and your period, I'm gonna forward some to the period between 1967 that I told you, when you are 20s, and the process, the 10 years until 1976, when I founded your 8 puzzle problem solving publication with Dr. Gunnar Good. Is correct the pronounce Gunnar Good?
Gunnar Gode. but that's hard even for Swedes. So
okay. And could you explain me how was this period from this meeting with the psychologist that you told in the interview until the process when you were like 30 or 32, something like that, and you published this first published, but I don't know if it was something before, but it was one of that I found it.
So basically that research on the 8 puzzle, that was my PhD dissertation.
Okay.
And Gunnar Gode, I think, was a very, excellent kind of researcher. When we met, he wasn't interested in what I was interested in. I was interested in human thinking, and he was actually studying kind of instinct behavior in fish. But he was one of those people that you could actually talk about pretty much anything, because he would be willing here to kind of apply whatever he knew and sort of talk about it. So I thought that was really helpful, that my own research, I pretty much had to develop by myself, because at that point in time, nobody really had worked with protocols in Sweden or even in Scandinavia. So he was kind of my sounding board. I had to kind of convince him before I actually did the studies. And and I think that was also, very good, because it really forced me to really understand everything. It was, I wasn't really handed anything. I was just given this opportunity here to have somebody really thoughtful sort of think about what I was arguing.
Interesting. So this was your main influence in the beginning. I think the Dr. Gunnar was your main influence, or no, in this period.
Yeah, obviously I was reading a lot, so I was really influenced there by Newell and Simon and sort of what they were, had written. And I think if you look at some of these papers about the 8 puzzle, you will see the references to the kind of research that, I was reading and also obviously being influenced by.
Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit of your process of changing your direction. Like you said, in this period, you're in the human thinking process. And I think here one of your game changings were when you decided to understand the thought process of like the chess player and other experts. But when you said like thinking out loud and this process, how did you change your direction of your research? In the beginning was human thinking, and then you go to this direction to go to the chess, because I think was from this chess that you connected with Bill Chase and Herb Simons, yeah? Or I'm wrong?
Well, you know, again, it's a question here of perspective, but I kind of almost feel like the things that I was interested in, you know, when I defended my dissertation really hasn't changed. It's more that the opportunities to study and the kind of questions that, you know, you could, that one might be able to contribute to using that methodology has sort of changed. And and when I came to Carnegie Mellon, you know, I was invited to Herb Simon to work on our model here for, you know, how people, you know, give verbal expression to their thoughts. And then I guess I wanted to find some other things to do. So I really enjoyed Bill Chase as a person that I want to spend time with. So that work here on the short-term memory training was sort of my attempt to find something that he would find interesting, but also something where I could now apply the protocol analysis stuff. So basically, that's kind of how that got started.
Interesting. So talking about Bill Chase, I don't know if it was him, but you said in an interview that some mentor asked you to work in a paper like a lot, and it was like 4 times that you work, and the mentor said, okay, now I can use that. Was him?
Yeah, that was Bill Chase. And,
Okay.
and I, you know, again here, can't swear, but it was like 30 times that I kept revising and getting feedback. And I really, you know, looking back, I think that was tremendously helpful to me.
Amazing.
But at the time, it was a little frustrating because, you know, I wanted to get a lot of publications and stuff.
And I couldn't answer, couldn't ask it you about these terms like path, journey, road. Is you can find something that you're in your mind, or is just a very good way to explain, like is means anything to you, like the words that you use a lot, like road, path, steps, and means anything to you in a personal aspect or not?
Well, I you know, I think that transition from being an explorer to being a scientist, you know, and that somehow, I think, explaining to other people the kind of changes that you go through when you're actually sitting in your office, I think it's easier for people to understand if you talk about as a journey where you are now actually experiencing other things than you did originally.
E aí, gostou? Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Se vocês gostaram, bota aí nos comentários, dá aquele like, manda para um amigo, compartilha, se inscreve no canal, faz o pacote completo. E eu te vejo semana que vem com a parte 2 dessa entrevista. Um grande beijo, um grande abraço e fui!